Okay, so now let us start off with the technical session. So for that, I would call upon Dr. S.R. Candy D. Kunha, Associate Professor of English, Department of Science and Humanities, Andhra Loyola University, Institute of Engineering and Technology, Andhra Pradesh, India, to chair the first technical session. Ma'am, we would request your presence.
Yeah, thank you.
A warm welcome to you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. So I'm Dr. Sister Candy Kuna from Andhra Loyola Institution, Andhra Loyola Institute of Engineering and Technology. I take this golden opportunity to thank Dr. R.S. Regin for giving me this lovely chance to chair the session. And I also thank Shillong Law College, the organizers, for wonderfully organizing this 3-day international conference. And it's my joy and pleasure to call upon the presenters of today's session. So may I invite Dr. Rashri Datta, Assistant Professor of Political Science, Department of Social Science, Fakir Mohan University, Odisha, to come forward and present your paper entitled Political Participation of Women in Odisha, a Social Cultural Perspective.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm Dr. Rajeshri Datta, and I work as Assistant Professor in Fakir Mohan University, Odisha. So the topic of my presentation is political participation of women in Odisha, a socio-cultural perspective. I'd like to share my screen. As I told, I'll be talking about political participation of women in Odisha, a socio-cultural perspective. Now, to begin with, with an increasing recognition among international community of women's historical exclusion from structures of power, a global commitment has been made to redress gender imbalance in politics. Now, women's enhanced participation in governance structures is viewed as the key to redress gender inequalities, not only in India, but across all societies. Now, political participation, as we know, it is a process by which people take part in political activities. Now, exercising voting rights or representation or getting elected during elections, these are regarded some of the important political activities of the citizens. Political participation of women is the precondition of socioeconomic development and enrichment of the quality of life in the society. Now, it is an unavoidable fact that women are struggling hard to attain space in the political arena. Odisha has gradually developed affirmative action policies to reach the goal of inclusive democracy, gender equality, and sustainable development. At the state level, recently, or we can say since 2000, special measures have been designed to ensure women's participation, development, and empowerment. So, as a result of which, attempts have been made to raise the level of awareness, expertise, policies, laws, and women's voice in decision making, thereby breaking the socio-cultural stereotypes of patriarchy. And when I look into the objectives of this paper, it is basically this paper deals with two objectives. Firstly, to analyze the history of political participation of women in Odisha, and secondly, to comprehend the challenges responsible for lesser participation and delineate the emerging trends of political participation of women in Odisha and the way forward. Now, this study is basically secondary in nature, and data needed for this analysis has been collected from different journal articles, reports, and a few clippings from magazines and newspapers. Now, if we little bit look into the history briefly, we find that the prominent women played a leading and important role in the freedom movement of India. In this context, the role of women in Odisha cannot be ignored. although like Odisha is considered as a conservative and backward society, the women took active part in national liberation struggle against the British with high sense of emancipation and participation. People not like women not only from the elite section but also from the lower strata, caste, creed participated in large numbers. And some of the remarkable name like Rama Devi, Sara Devi, and Kuntala Kumari Sabat, these are the some of the important names, and many more are there. Like beside the active involvement in the freedom movement, there were also many women writers who came forward and they stimulated these common women through their writings to carry forward the freedom movement in Odisha. Now, two important names are there. One is Sarala Devi, and through her poems and essays like Utkalare Nari Samasya, Nari Jagat, Nari Dabi, she wrote about the upliftment of women. Similarly, another woman, Sita Devi, she wrote a play named as Mandira Pravesa, which was based on Harijan movement of Gandhiji. So we can say that mostly the political participation of women in Odisha began with the visit of Mahatma Gandhi to Odisha in 1921, when he visited Cuttack, and he addressed the women, and that political conference was regarded as the first political conference of Odia women. Now, the women were so much inspired from Gandhi's speech that they, at that moment only, they donated their golden ornaments to the Tilak Swaraj Fund, which is meant for freedom struggle. And the political activities of the Odia women reached at its apex during the period of Quit India movement. And women like Malati Chaudhary, Rama Devi, Sara Devi, and many others contributed immensely to make the Quit India movement a grand success. Now, if we look in, also I had like till now I have talked about participation of women in pre-independence era, and now if we give importance, or if we talk about women representation in Odisha Legislative Assembly from 1952 to 2019, or in the post-independence era, we find that in the pre-independence era, there was a considerable gap between men and women in Odisha in electoral arena. But this table shows that, or this table shows the number and percentage of women legislators in Odisha Legislative Assembly from 1952 to 2019. And from this table, we find that after India gained independence, although there has been an increase in the political participation of women in Odisha, the real power continues to lay with the male politicians. Independence brought gender equality in the form of constitutional rights, but historically, women's political participation has remained low. So many of them contested in the election to Assembly and Lok Sabha. A few of them were also appointed and ministered both at the center and the state. However, the political field of Odisha till the late 1960s was dominated by male leaders like Hare Krishna Mehta, Biju Patnaik, Navakrishna Chaudhary, and many others. And if from the table we see that in the mid-term election to the Assembly of 1971, although 12 women candidates contested, none of them were elected to the Odisha Legislative Assembly. Nandini Satpathy, the then Union Minister of State, became the Chief Minister of Odisha, and she was the first women Chief Minister of Odisha. And in 1985 election, Odisha for the first time saw a large number of women candidates present in the House. Large means 7. And during 1990s, the women representation further increased under the ministry of Janaki Vallabh Patnaik, Giridhar Gomango, and Hemanand Biswal. Now, if we turn on to the present Chief Minister of Odisha, Naveen Patnaik, who assumed the charge of office of the Biju Janata Dal and Bharatiya Janata Party coalition government on 5th March 2000, and for the first time after he came, 14 women members were elected to the assembly in 2000. Now, 2014 elections, women voters surpassed men turnout and helped BJD register a landslide victory both in the assembly as well as in the Lok Sabha election. Now, 2019 election is very much important, the assembly election as well as Lok Sabha election for Odisha. Why? Because the recent assembly election of 2019 saw increase in the women representation to 10.2%. Now, the women reservation bill may still be pending in parliament, but 33% of the women candidates from Odisha were elected to the Lok Sabha in 2019 election. And 21 MPs from Odisha, 7 were women, and these women represented different sections of society. How? Now, one of them is an IS officer, Aprajita Sarangi, a doctor, Rajeshri Malik, a grassroots level leader, Pramila Visoi, a member from erstwhile royal family, Sangeeta Singh Deo, a homemaker, Manjulata Mandal, engineer, Chandrani Murmu, OFS officer, Sarmista Sethi. So this representation of women from different sections of the society may be an incremental approach, but it is a welcome step to overcome the socio-cultural barriers. Now, coming towards the conclusion part, what are the challenges if we see? The first thing is that political parties hesitate to field women candidates. Hence, the number of women candidates represented by various political parties has always been very low as compared to their numbers in the population. Among women, the second challenge is that women who manage to rise in the political echelons in spite of their ability in administration and political articulation, very few women reach to the level of cabinet ministers. There and mostly they remain like deputy minister, minister of states. Now, when these women reach to these few ministerial levels, they are again assigned portfolios only in the social service sectors like health, education, women and child development, etc. Next challenge is that women representation in Odisha reveals that most parties resorted to tokenism and symbolism when it came to representation of women. And almost all the political parties have set up like women's cell or wing, but they worked as ancillary bodies. Very few women reached the position of party president or leader of legislative party. Now, what can be done? Apart from like after reservation, some steps are necessary not only for the sake of gender equality, but also for good governance. Now, first maybe the minimum qualification. Setting a minimum qualification will encourage women to get seats based on their merits and not due to political influence or nepotism. And states should also incentivize the meritorious women to be in politics. There should be encouragement and mentoring from the senior and experienced politicians. And third is that cleaning up the system. Credibility of all members must be verified to determine that they can work well with women politicians, bureaucrats, or maybe the party workers. Lastly, creating a safe and favorable women environment where they would like to, or they can get a safe and favorable work environment, and all steps must be ensured to protect from physical, mental, or sexual harassment. Now, to conclude, I would like to bring to the notice that due to this social tradition of patriarchy, the women in Odisha left behind to defend their voices. However, with the changing environment and women-oriented laws, the percentage of women at various levels of political activities no doubt has increased dramatically. But still, they are not able to exercise the real power, and they are just rubber stamps either in the hand of their family members or in the hands of the party leaders or members. So an increased political participation like 2019 is just the beginning. The trend should continue, rather stop. So political participation of women in all spheres of political life and competition in particular will not only ensure political parity and equality with men, but also bring gender issues to the forefront, leading to the larger issues concerning women. Political participation of women demands the value of equality and justice in daily life, support in protest against oppression, and acceptance in the public sphere. So we need to recognize the forces that limit them and work collectively and continuously to change the unequal power structure in politics. So these are some of the references I had used in writing my paper, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some of my views on this topic relating to political participation of women in Odisha. Thank you.
So, Dr. Rajeshri, that was a wonderful presentation you made on political participation of women in Orissa. So you have highlighted the political scenario, you have brought out, explored a lot of statistical data, and you have also given the scope and hope for future development of women, how they can come up, and you have also highlighted the challenges, and you have also put forth your point very strongly that if women are given opportunity, definitely they will make this world a better place. So your presentation was very good. You have logically brought out the points. So may I invite now the other participants in the group, if anyone would like to ask any question to Dr. Rajeshri with regard to any of the point she has raised. Anyone would like to ask any question, you can put it in the chat box, or you can voice out your feeling, or you can raise your hand, etc. So Dr. Rajeshri, I don't think anyone has a question for you. Your presentation is very clear. Audible, though your slides were stuck, but still you made it very clear. So continue your good research and explore your explore your area of research in women empowerment, and encourage people in and around so that you can bring your research to completion. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
So let me call the next presenter, Vijayam, Assistant Professor, Department of English, MGM College of Arts and Science, Trivandrum, to present a paper entitled A Historical Overview of Remats of South Kannada. Please explain the title of your paper once again and introduce yourself to the audience.
Good morning, ma'am. And first of all, I want to inform you that I have been facing a serious network issue, and even when I switch on my camera, my voice is not audible. Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Please introduce the title of your paper and introduce yourself.
Okay.
You're audible, no problem.
Okay, I am Viji. I am Assistant Professor of English, MGM College of Arts and Science, Kanyapuram. It's a place in Trivandrum, this capital of Kerala state. So, my paper is titled Kuttumani, a historical overview of the remnants of South Canada. So, I think it's Kuttumani for some people. And Guntumani are the traditional manor houses or the architectural remnants of South Canada. South Canada, I mean South Canada means the southern part of Karnataka state, that is the parts of Kasaragod district of Kerala, Coorg, etc. So, Guttumane are the traditional houses. Guttumane are the traditional manor houses built by the Bun community. So, the Bun community are a kind of is it clear now?
Vijay, your voice is breaking and the words are not that clear.
Ma'am, how is it now?
Okay.
Okay, ma'am. So the Guttumane are the manor houses, the traditional houses built by the Bund community of southern Karnataka. So these Bund community are the coastal regions of southern part of Karnataka state. So, and in the Tulu language, the term Bund means a powerful man or warrior. And coming to the focus area of my research or my paper, that is Guttumane, these houses are made of mud, and these houses have a earthen color. Because of the raw materials used for this house, the people of Bund community didn't use any kind of artificial materials for their architecture. They use mud, then leaves and wood from their surroundings to build such a huge house. And when we approach a Guttumane, there is an elaborate entry which doubles up a hall, and this hall is called a Hebbagalu or Moggashale. And this hall, it is representation of family or a Bund community family. So, when, however, the Hebbagalu, the size of the Hebbagalu or the hall determines the financial status of this Bund community. When after the Hebbagalu would have 2 or 3 levels with the width decreasing as the height increases. The size of the Hebbagalu, and when the height increases, the levels or the stories of Hebbagalu decreases. Then the central area has a passage to enter the house with few steps lower than the plinth, and there is on the both sides of the passage, there is that is the left and right side, there is a plinth made of wood, and these plinth also gives separate areas. The low is for the meetings for the common people or the lower class people of the Bund community, and the middle portion of the plinth is for the higher class people. The people belongs to the higher class sit in the middle area, and the upper or the elevated area is used to sit for the landlord. And the speciality of this upper area is that the people can the landlord, but according to the landlord, he can see everyone's faces. So that is the speciality of Hebbagalu or the Moggashale. And these Moggashale are decorated with many wooden architecture. Okay, then according to the structure or according to the front portion of the house face almost to the northern direction, but sometimes it is to the east. And these houses have 3 yards. The first yard or the outermost yard is called a Horangala. It is for the community gatherings. The people from the Bund community gathered in this particular yard called the outer yard called the Horangala. And the inner yard is called a Volangala. It is where the family gatherings are held. So it's a private place
the family members assembled in the Olankala. And there is an outer yard where the agrarian activities are held, like harvesting, drying the paddy sales, etc., are held in the outer yard. And in the backyard, in the south edge of the compound, there is a storehouse, and there is a horse stable in the south and a cow shed, and there is a entrance in the end of the house called Anne Bagalu, which is for getting grains in and letting the cattle out. The people, I told you earlier, because there is the Bund community are a warrior class community. Along with, they are an agrarian community too. So, harvesting, sowing seeds, all taking place in these houses. And through the entrance called Anne Bagalu, they get the grains in, letting it out, and they used this entrance to let the cattle out of the house. And the area of the cow shed was used to separate grains from the plant and the veranda to feed the laborers during these times. And there are also bedrooms on these Guttumane on the ground floor. And like every houses, Guttumane has kitchens also. And these kitchens can be located in the northeast, south, or southeast direction of the house. And the selection of the direction of kitchen depends on the fact that the position of kitchen prevents the westerfly winds taking the smoke of the kitchen into the house. Also, the morning sun would enter the kitchen, which is a good disinfectant and provides light for the early morning activities. And in details, while analyzing the details of the Guttumane, we can just of or Manushya Chandrika. So, Tachi Shastra, these are the roles, the rules and restrictions that is formed to build, or the laws that is used for building a house. And the another remarkable feature of this houses is the adaptation to its climatic conditions. So in southern Karnataka, there is extreme hot, sometimes there is heavy rainfall. So architecture of these houses is adaptable to all these climatic changes. And the walls are made of mud, and there is in the roofing there is a covering of leaves along with the mud, so it can prevent the temperature. The people living inside the house didn't get affected with the heavy temperature because of the leaf covering inside the roof. And ventilation and shade there are some examples of Guttumane still in Karnataka, southern Karnataka. There, the Mudilkatte house near Basarur, it's a place, and the Garden house at Parkala. These are all examples of Guttumane. And there is a heritage village in Karnataka that is called Pilikula. It's a heritage village. There is it's all traditions and cultures. They kept all the agrarian tools they used for farming, etc. And to conclude, my point is that these kinds of houses represent a beautiful period unique to South Canada. And the coming generation, so the new generation of people must study about these cultures. And many represent the use of raw materials that is abundantly available from our nature, apart from the artificial materials that we are using today. So the Guttumane, while entering the Guttumane, we can feel that there is the inside of these houses are so cool, except the artificial use of air conditioners or refrigerators, etc. And these units of the modern types of furniture and so on. And there is a reduced type of energy consumption because of the use of materials available from nature. And it is high time we stop looking west and appreciate and learn from what exists in our times and use modern technology to take our heritage forward. and knowledge of the West intelligently architecture better and sustainable for our land and society. So my paper focus on the point that it is a high time to come or return to the nature apart from we are using the modern technologies. Okay. So that's all. Thank you. Thank you for giving me a
Thank you, Vichi. That was a very good presentation. So you made me to remember Indus Valley civilization, which we learned in our bygone days of Indus Valley civilization, how those things were explored, how they started understanding the Indus Valley people, how they lived. So you are also bringing a symbolic expression of Gutumani,
Yes,
which
ma'am.
is very important, especially to preserve our environment. And very wonderfully, you have connected with the ongoing crisis using all kind of raw materials which are not that conducive to the nature, but you have shown the natural way of living and then also a healthier way of living. So your paper is very good and apt for the present context. I would also suggest you to explore some text of some writer which may have the expression of these kind of houses, so that there is also literary, if you are from the literary stream, so there is also a literary expression to this kind of presentations. So you have given a very good historical view and I am very glad about it. So continue your research and thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay. So now I call upon the previous presenter, Bharti, Research Scholar, Department of Education, University of Jammu, to present your paper. I think Bharti has joined the group. May I request Bharti, Research Scholar, Department of Education, University of Jammu, to present your paper. Is Bharti available? Okay, Bharti has left the meeting. So may I call upon the last presenter of the day? That is a joint presentation. Joint presentation by Saubhagya SP and Dr. N.U. Lakshmi. So please introduce the title of your paper and introduce yourself. So they are a research scholar from the University of Sri Ayappa College for women, affiliated to Women University, Tamil Nadu, and a research scholar. It's a joint paper. So please introduce yourself to the audience.
A warm good morning to one and all.
Yes.
Myself Saubhagya, research scholar from Sri Ayappa College for Women, Nagarkoil. And because of the network issue, I'll be just presenting my paper by myself. My paper is a subject-oriented one and it is titled A Postmodern Perspective of Murakami's Killing Commentator Amidst the Hyper-Real Chaos. My paper deals with the sociological issue of how the characters of Murakami in the novel Killing Commentator face psychological damages or psychological trauma. The present study tries to dig out the hidden postmodernist techniques used by Murakami in his most mysterious and heavily packed novel Killing Commentator. Living in a post-truth era, which is a leftover of postmodernist innovations, man molds himself to depend largely on metaphors. Truth or reality in postmodern notion is viewed in a different tone. It is partial, patchy, and perpetually deficient. Contrary to realism, postmodernism stresses on the hybridity of reality. A travel through ideas and metaphors, the novel Killing Commentator is an account of the struggles encountered by a 36-year-old man who ends up realizing that life is nothing but an attempt to believe the unbelievable. Postmodernism is known for its use of an assortment of techniques used by writers to furbish their writings. Beginning with the theater of the absurd, postmodernism celebrates everything that is formless and wishes to embrace a higher truth. Like all other theories, there is no definite date for the rise and fall of postmodernism, and some critics argue that postmodernism had marked its beginning with the death of Virginia Woolf and James Joyce. And Murakami's novel, Killing Commendator, it is a novel filled with suspense that exhibits postmodern ideas and techniques. The life of a 36-year-old man with all its complications is carefully handled in the novel, and it can be considered as a Dacian story wherein the main characters with his companions accomplish many existential struggles between the shifting worlds. At times, he is in a world which is familiar to his existence, but suddenly he is lured by a world which is full of enigmatic people where ideas and metaphors dumped into the real life. The narrator is a portrait painter who is forced to face situations which would aid him in losing his consciousness. Fragmentation is a major technique employed by Murakami in the novel with the help of interchanging plots, and he is a master of fragmentation that he always uses fragmented and discontinued thoughts through his works. The chapters in the novel are put in a disheveled style which is capable of confusing the readers. The narrator, being abandoned by his wife, discontinues his life at home and starts his journey to a place which is unknown to him. Again, in the novel, uh, again the novel starts with him finding an old friend who is ready to help him in his need. Even though the plot is discontinued and there is a strange connection which bonds the whole story, fragmentation is exposed to the Senate as the narrator unexpectedly unearthed the truth behind the life of Wataru Menshiki and Mari Ekikawa, the other major characters in the novel. To a great extent, the life of the characters, as scrappy, still are capable of finding new ways to stick together their disjoint life. This Murakami uses the technique of intertextuality, which is a common feature of his work, and the popularization of the term intertextuality is an outcome of an analysis of Mikhail Bakhtin's concept of carnival and dialogism by the eminent critic and writer Julia Kristeva. And the concept of intertextuality in connection with metafiction can allude to two things: that no text can be written in remoteness, or the text is affianced in a discourse within itself. In Killing Commendator, Murakami refers to various texts and musical compositions to substantiate that every text is dependent in one way or the other. The author cites examples from various writers like Edgar Allan Poe, Samuel Beckett, Dostoevsky, George Orwell, and a lot more. The writers whom the author referred in the novel as the major characteristics of their novel are existential crisis, the psychological dilemma of man, and likewise, Murakami's novels are also filled with existential crisis and psychological trauma that man experiences in this world. Magical realism is employed by the postmodernist writers like Gabriel Garcia Marquez as well as Murakami. By juxtaposing the realistic with the fantastic, the use of dreams, surrealistic description, and abrupt surprise marks the characteristics of magical realism. Murakami is a writer who blends reality with fantasy, and in Killing Commendator, he constructs the plot by keeping magical elements as its base. The story of a portrait turning into reality evokes shock as well as surprise in the readers. The painting that gained life in a particular point of time started guiding the narrator. The painting is described as, but this painting, titled Killing Commendator, was full of blood. Realistic blood flowing all over. Two men were fighting with heavy, ancient swords in what seemed to be a duel. Soon after some days, the narrator witnessed the characters in the painting as alive. After witnessing an old scene, the narrator is in a dilemma that he could not have a mutual understanding of the happenings. Man lives in a world of ideas and metaphors where life drags him to an extreme end of suffering. In such a world, man tend to believe what is hyper-real and may create their own fantasies. Jean Baudrillard exemplifies the ambush of imitation on the day-to-day life of humans who is competent of causing an implosion of reality. He says that in such a world, only signs that tend to observe human reality. He reinforces the notion of the laws of the real by pointing out that the present-day environment is permeated by hyperreality, that it is a thorny task to separate real from dream. Murakami's novel is filled with hyperreality that often twists the reader's power of understanding. The narrator, when passes through the underground, the character Donna Anna states, I quote, no problem, the gap flows to that river between being and nothing. And a wonderful metaphor can reveal the possibility that is hidden in everything. As a talented poet reveals a new landscape through a landscape, the best poems emerge from the best metaphors. You must keep an eye on the new landscape. Unquote. The narrator finds the painting as a turning point in his life, even if he is unable to relinquish his capabilities. Postmodernism celebrates the surface by absolutely negotiating the profundity, and Murakami's apt usage of postmodernist techniques generates awareness in his readers as well as the world about the importance of imagination and the necessity to distinguish reality from imagination. Murakami, through his characters, revealed the truth that man, in spite of running away from his responsibilities, he should start accepting the responsibilities put forth by the world, by this chaotic world. My study concludes that man can heal himself without the aid of any other healing measures. When he tries to analyze his own self and his psychological dilemmas, and he is capable of wiping away his psychological dilemmas if he possesses the strength of analyzing himself. Thank you.
So Saubhagya SP, so that was a lovely presentation. So you have taken a wonderful text, Murakami's text, and you have brought out the postmodern perspectives through the text. You have also touched upon the existential aspects in the text, and then it is wonderfully connected. As a research scholar, you have gone deeper into the exploration of the text. But I would suggest you can also read a little bit of existential writers like Camus, Sartre, Jasper, Heidegger, Kierkegaard, all those. And if anything is relevant to the text, you can also connect, because you are also talking about the existential realities, right? So, but postmodern techniques are wonderfully explored, and then you have also touched upon hyper-real chaos of the text. So I wish you all the best for your research journey as a doctoral, as a research scholar, pursuing your doctoral research. So thank you. It was a very good presentation. So once again, I call upon our previous participant, Bharati. Is she there? Bharati, I think she has left the meeting once again. So this was the last paper. We had 3 presentations, and all the 3 presentations were on various themes, and they were talking about various aspects in literature, language, especially cultural aspects, and all the papers were relevant to the theme of an international conference. So once again, I thank Dr. Regine, President of Cape Comorin Trust, for giving me this wonderful opportunity to chair this session. And I thank the organizers of Shillong Law College for wonderfully organizing, and all the best for all the technical sessions and all the deliberations in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for honoring us by chairing this session. It was indeed a wonderful session. We are actually very honored to have you as chair.